Imagine waking up one morning, and oil is gone, not just expensive, not a fuel shortage. Completely gone. Cars don't start. Trucks are stranded on highways, planes stay grounded, and supermarket shelves slowly begin to empty. And suddenly, for the first time, people realize something terrifying. Modern civilization is far more fragile than it looks, because oil is not just the fuel we put into cars. Oil is the invisible backbone of the modern world. So today we're going to explore a very uncomfortable question. How many days could the world survive without oil? And honestly, the answer is far more disturbing than most people think. Most people think oil only matters because of gasoline, but the reality is much bigger than that. Oil is inside transportation, agriculture, plastics, medicine, asphalt roads, packaging, clothing, electronics, and even the phone you're probably holding right now. Look around the room you're in. A huge percentage of the objects around you either came directly from oil or were transported to you because of oil. And modern civilization was built on top of that system. Cities expanded because people could drive. Global trade exploded because ships could move goods cheaply across oceans. Supermarkets stayed full because products could travel thousands of miles every single day. So this is not just an energy story. Oil is the hidden infrastructure of modern life itself. And that's why losing oil wouldn't simply create a transportation problem. It would shake the entire system. Now let's imagine it. Overnight, all oil production stops. At first, people probably wouldn't fully understand what was happening, but within hours, panic would begin. One of the first things to collapse would be logistics. Trucks can't refuel, cargo systems freeze, ports begin slowing down. And then the supermarkets. People would rush into stores trying to buy everything they can, because most supermarkets only carry a few days of inventory. We tend to imagine stores as giant warehouses, but they're not. Modern supply chains work like a constantly moving machine, and the moment the trucks stop moving, shelves begin to empty. Ironically, the first major crisis wouldn't even be hunger. It would be uncertainty, because people would suddenly realize something they never noticed before. This system is not as stable as we thought. After about a week, things would start becoming serious. Public transportation systems would struggle. Most flights would be canceled. Global trade would begin freezing almost entirely. But the biggest problem would be food production, because modern agriculture depends heavily on oil. Tractors, harvest machines, fertilizer production, irrigation systems. Even getting vegetables from farms to supermarkets depends on fuel. Most of the food we eat today travels enormous distances before reaching us. And what makes that possible is cheap energy. Without oil, the world would suddenly be forced to rely much more on local production. But there's a huge problem with that. Modern cities are not designed to feed themselves, especially massive cities like New York, London, Istanbul. These cities survive because supplies constantly flow into them every single day, and once that flow stops, pressure on the system grows very quickly. Because oil is an incredibly dense source of energy, a relatively small amount can power enormous systems, and for more than a century, humanity built almost everything around that reality. In many ways, the modern economy works like this. Cheap energy creates growth. Expensive or limited energy creates instability. That's why even rising oil prices can shake the global economy. Because oil is not just another product. Oil is more like the bloodstream of the entire system. And here's the strange part. We like to believe technology runs the world, but technology itself depends on energy. Servers, factories, internet infrastructure, satellites. Behind all the screens and digital systems, there is still a physical energy foundation, and oil is deeply connected to it. At this point, some people might say, okay, but we have electric cars now. And yes, we do, but this is much bigger than passenger vehicles. A huge part of global transportation still runs on oil: cargo ships, airplanes, construction equipment, heavy industry, agricultural machinery. Replacing all of that would take decades. And on top of that, a large percentage of global electricity production still depends on fossil fuels. So removing oil from the system overnight is basically impossible. Because modern civilization is far more energy dependent than most people realize. After a month, the global economy would look completely different. Some countries would enter severe crises. Entire industries would shut down. People's priorities would begin changing. Luxury consumption would collapse. Travel would decrease dramatically. Local production would suddenly become extremely valuable. Governments would probably begin rationing fuel for critical sectors only: healthcare, food distribution, military systems, power infrastructure, emergency services. In other words, people would no longer use energy however they wanted. And at that point, society would finally understand something important. The lifestyle we consider normal today was built on cheap energy. Maybe the most fascinating part of all this is how invisible oil has become. It's been part of our lives for so long that we barely notice it anymore. We think it's normal for lights to turn on instantly. We think it's normal for supermarket shelves to stay full. We think it's normal for products to arrive from another continent in just a few days. But all of that depends on enormous energy systems operating constantly in the background. And as long as the system keeps working, nobody really thinks about the infrastructure underneath it until something breaks. And if you study history, you see this pattern over and over again. Civilizations rarely collapse all at once. They weaken when energy systems, logistics, or resources begin failing, because complex systems can look incredibly powerful, but at the same time, they can also be extremely fragile. Probably not completely. Humanity would adapt. But living standards would change dramatically. The world would become slower, more expensive, less convenient, and maybe for the first time people would fully realize something uncomfortable. Modern civilization is not powered by technology alone. It is powered by energy. Cheap energy. And maybe that was the hidden deal underneath modern life all along. It's easy to think of oil as just gasoline, but in reality, oil is the invisible engine of modern civilization, and maybe the most important question is this: are we truly an advanced technological civilization, or are we simply a civilization built on massive amounts of energy? Because the line between civilization and energy may be much thinner than we want to believe. If you enjoy videos like this, where we explore the hidden side of economics, energy, history, and power, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because the world is almost never as simple as it looks.